Hey everybody, want to show you some pocket knives today. Got a little sampling here, some different types. Definitely not an exhaustive survey of pocket knives. It's just seemingly endless, different varieties and whatnot, but there's some basic types here. Most basic, simple type of pocket knife, folding knife is a friction folder. So this Opinel has no spring. There's a little pin in here that the blade pivots off of, and pretty simple. This Higo no Kami is another type of friction folder that is, there's just, the mechanism is essentially just this pin here that the blade swivels on. A lot of folding knives with this general pattern have cropped up around the world independently of each other. A lot that use this little tail here on the blade to close the blade during cutting. So while you're cutting, this little tail is pushing into the handle and keeping it open. But there's no lock, there's no spring. Again, simple mechanism. Knives with springs, maybe the simplest type of a knife with a spring is a single blade jackknife. So this also has one pin here that the blade pivots off of, but there's a spring on the back that tends to keep the knife open, and when it's closed, tends to keep the knife closed. But again, there's no lock. This is a jackknife with a couple different blades. So each blade is working independently of the other along the same pivot. They each have their own spring. So they are seated into the handle along their own slot. A pen knife can have a number of different blades, but a two-bladed pen knife like this one has two blades on each side of the handle, but they're sharing a spring and they're sharing the same slot. So they need to be ground and seated in such a way that they overlap each other and don't bang into each other. Pen knives have gone over tons of different incarnations. There's a lot of old ones that you'll find that were, really super finely made little things. They were originally meant for sharpening quills to write with, but they became watch fob knives. So these little ones with the tiny little bail on them. You'll find varying, degrees of fanciness on these. And, carrying around a knife used to be a staple and kind of would indicate your, position in society and your class and all that. This is an interesting one here. This is an American pattern called a Stockman, and a Stockman is kind of integrating both the jackknife and a penknife. In that we have two blades on one side that basically are working like a jackknife. They have the same pin and a separate spring. And then on the opposite end, we have another smaller blade that's sharing space and spring with the other smaller secondary blade on this. So kind of a hybrid of a jackknife and a penknife on this one. And then there's the different locking mechanisms on knives. And this is a really super old style here. This is a ring pull lock. And this knife has a spring here. This spring is pretty simple. It's an external spring, and it's released by pulling this ring, and that releases the blade to close. Then we have Humpback Locks. This is another old style of lock. This is a 1940s era, a World War II era style knife that's still made in Sheffield. And this knife, the blade locks with this separate mechanism here that pushes in. This evolved into a more flush design for a lockback knife here, like this Payaris folder from Spain. But I think a lot of people are familiar with this. This is like the buck knife style release here, so that pushes in and releases the spring. And a bit of a variation on it, but a little bit different, is the spring on this Laguiole from Fontenelle Pateau. The whole spring is released by squeezing the end. On the humpback and this lockback here, the spring is separated here in the middle. Another older style, a newer style of knife here, but a liner lock. So there's a second liner that's put in that opens up when the knife is open and keeps the knife from closing. And you could find this on some old knives. This was invented in about 1900, this type of liner lock. There's a million more locks, there's a million more knives, but just a little introduction here. Hope you found something in it, and feel free to check out our other videos too. All right, thanks.